Hello everyone. Welcome you all to a fresh Monday morning. Few days back, some materials were sent to you, like one prose, The Old Man at the Bridge, and one poem, and some figure of speech as well. So whenever time permits, go through those. You must have solved the question answers as well that were given to you. And figure of speech, while you read the lessons, I had told you earlier as well, while you read some stories or storybooks or some lessons, some poems, so try to find out the figure of speech used. So that is for study, that is for your studies. Okay. So it is not to be by-hearted or to be learned, but then it is to be used, and you will understand it better as you use it more. Today let us take up another short story. So take out your treasure trove book and open page number 74, chapter number 5, A Face in the Dark. Now the name itself, the title, A Face in the Dark, suggests that there is some sense of strangeness, some sense of mystery in the story. Well, it is something like that, and I'm sure you will like it, because normally you like these ghost stories, suspense, thrillers, so this is also a thriller. Ruskin Bond is the author. A little about Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is, in fact, he is an eminent contemporary Indian writer. Okay, and Indian writer, but of British descent. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi Award to honor his work of literature. He was born on May 19, and tomorrow happens to be his birthday, 19th of May, year 1934, in Kasauli, Punjab, India. He still lives, and he is still closely associated with education in some capacity or the other. He often visits different universities and colleges. As I'm told that a few years back he had visited Bijubi College at Bhubaneswar, and he had delivered a lecture there. So a very much Indian writer. And this particular story is also, while I read the lesson, at the same time, try to find out how the author has created an atmosphere of strangeness, eeriness, strangeness of mystery and supernaturalism. Okay. Something that we often say that it's not possible, it cannot happen. So let us get started without wasting much time. I'm going through the lesson, reading it, and while I read, run through the lines. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. Anglo-Indian refers to a person, English-speaking person from America or some other places, foreign country, who is in India, who lives in India or who works in India. So an Anglo-Indian teacher was returning to his school late one night. Some years back we had Mr. Wilfred Paul. So Anglo-Indian, something like that, though he is more Indian than Anglo. So was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. Now what is outskirts? Outskirts is outside the limits of the city or the town. That is outskirts. So you can imagine a lot of trees, denseness about these outskirts. So he was on the outskirts of the hill station of Simla. From before Kipling's time. Kipling. Now here Kipling is referred to Rudyard Kipling, another great writer. Okay. His full name is Joseph Rudyard Kipling. He was born on December 30, 1865. This is for your knowledge. And again, he's from India. He was born in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, and he died in the year 1936 on January 18. But he died in London, in England. And he is a short story writer, poet and novelist, chiefly remembered for his celebration of British imperialism. Mostly his poems, his tales and his poems that he wrote, they were of British soldiers in India and for children as well. And most importantly, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1907. Okay. One of the most famous works of Rudyard Kipling is the poem If. It's a wonderful, wonderful poem. If you ever come across, or you can Google search as well, If. It's a beautiful poem. And read it, try to understand the poem, and if there is any trouble in understanding, you feel free to ask me as well. I love to explain that poem to all of you. A few years back, it was in our syllabus as well. In one of the classes, If was there in the syllabus as well. It's a wonderful poem. It is about life, about the basis of life. If, how should we lead a life? So it is from Kipling's time. That means when Kipling was a teacher there. So from before Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines. That means the rules and regulations or this. Now we are talking of the school where Mr. Oliver is working now. He is an Anglo-Indian teacher, so he works in that school. And this school is pretty old as well, which we can well understand because it's from Kipling's time. And right from that time, the school had been run on English public school lines. The rules and regulations, maybe the syllabus, etc. and all the things. So they were on English public school lines, and the boys, most of them from wealthy Indian families. So obviously this is for the rich. The school is mainly for the rich. Or bleisures. Bleisures you all know. You also have bleisures in your uniform. You wear it. We teachers also wear bleisures or coats sometimes. Caps and ties. So this was the school uniform. Which also suggests that it was a pretty sophisticated school. Life magazine, it's the name of a magazine. Life magazine, in a feature on India, had once called it the Eton of the East. So Eton, it is again another school in the Western countries, in foreign countries, somewhere in Europe, and very famous school Eton. So this school was compared with Eton. So it was called the Eton of the East. This is in the eastern side, and that was the western, in the west, Eton. Mr. Oliver had been teaching in the school for several years. So we suggest that Mr. Oliver had a very long experience of teaching in the school. The Simla Bazaar, with its cinemas and restaurants, was about 3 miles from the school. And Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, you know a bachelor? An unmarried male is a bachelor, who is not married. Usually strolled into the town in the evening. Strolled, just a leisurely walk, just went for a walk, for spending a little time. So that was his regular habit. He used to go to that Simla Bazaar, strolled into the town in the evening, and he returned after dark. Returning after dark, when he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. So that is what Mr. Oliver usually did. Every evening he would go to the Simla Bazaar, and there he would spend some time, and then while returning it would be dark, and he would take the shortcut through the pine forest. Most of the people did not take that take that route, okay, because after dark, that pine forest route, it was through the pine forest, through the jungle, so they did not find it very safe. But Mr. Oliver was fearless, and every day he would return by that way. And it was a shortcut as well. Probably that might be one of the reasons why Mr. Oliver preferred that route. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds. Eerie is strange. So this is the element of strangeness that the author has tried to instill while writing the story. That eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road, and that is the reason why most of the people did not take that route through the pine forest, because it was scary for them. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. He carried a torch and its gleam is the rays, the light. The batteries were running down. That means after a long time, the batteries generally run down. Your mobile phones as well, the charge, it runs down. Similarly, batteries as well, they run down. Moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. Okay. So, because his battery was running down and it would be dark, so he was trying to cover up that distance pretty quickly down the narrow forest path, when its flickering light fell in the figure of a boy. And then while he was returning, that flickering light, that means flickering is moving, as he was walking with the torch, it was of course moving, so light was also moving along with it. So that light fell on the figure of a boy who was sitting alone on a rock. Mr. Oliver stopped. Boys were not supposed to be out after dark. So that was the rule in the school, that the boys, those who stayed there in the hostel, they were not allowed, they were not supposed to be out after dark. And so when Mr. Oliver saw this boy sitting, he wasn't very impressed. He asked, "What are you doing out here, boy?" asked Mr. Oliver sharply. So we suggest that Mr. Oliver was not very happy, seeing that boy sitting there. Moving closer so that he could recognize the miscreant. Miscreant means one who has done something wrong, a wrongdoer. Okay, something wrong if someone has done is called a miscreant. And this boy was out after dark, so he was a miscreant according to Mr. Oliver. But even as he approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. So the boy did not respond. He did not answer. And as Mr. Oliver drew closer to him, he realized that there was something wrong with the boy. The boy appeared to be crying, and he was crying. More than that, he was a lot of sobbing instead of not crying bitterly. His head hung down. He held his face in his hands, and his body shook convulsively. So as he was crying, his body was shaking. It was a strange, soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver felt distinctly uneasy. So it was not that usual cry, okay, or weeping. So Mr. Oliver first felt that there was something wrong, and then he did not feel very comfortable. It was written uneasy, he felt. "Well, what's the matter?" he asked, his anger giving way to concern. So earlier he was angry when he saw the boy sitting outside. It was after dark, and so he thought that the boy had violated the rules of the school, so he was angry. But then when he found that there was something seriously wrong with the boy, then he was no more angry, but then he was now a little concerned. So his anger giving way to concern. "What are you crying for?" The boy would not answer or look up. His body continued to be raked with silent sobbing. Raked is that slight movement, convulsive movement, as was said earlier. So that he continued that, and he continued that sobbing. "Come on, boy. You shouldn't be out here at this hour. Tell me the trouble. Look up." The boy looked up. He took his hands from his face and looked up at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face, if you could call it a face. So finally, the boy, he raised his head and looked at Mr. Oliver. As he did that, the torchlight that fell on his face, and then it had no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It was just a round, smooth head with a school cap on top of it. And that's where the story should end. Okay, so what did Mr. Oliver see? When the light fell on the face of the boy, he found that the face was absolutely strange. There were no eyes, no ears, no nose or mouth. It was just a round, smooth object, head. That's all. and the school cap was on top of it, which made it even more strange. So what would happen if you come across this kind of a thing? If you just see this kind of a thing, what would happen? Will you faint? So there is the same thing that the author says, that probably the story should end here. That means after seeing this, Mr. Oliver must have fainted, or he must have run away from there, scared, dead scared. Must have run away from there. It should end. But for Mr. Oliver, it did not end there. But it did not end for Mr. Oliver. Why? He ran, of course. The torch fell from his trembling hand. So obviously he was scared and he started trembling. The torch fell from his hand. He turned and scrambled down the path, running blindly through the trees and calling for help. So he did not see anything, just ran blindly after seeing that. Okay, torch fell from his hand, it was dark, and he somehow managed to run from there. And at the same time, he called for help. He was still running towards the school buildings when he saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. This was some relief, should give him some relief, that as he ran, he saw that there was a lantern, and it was swinging in the middle of the path. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman. So somehow he stumbled, almost like falling. When you run fast and you suddenly apply the brakes all of a sudden, you stumble, and he stumbled up to the watchman. He was a watchman who was holding that lantern, gasping for breath. Gasping for breath is running out of breath. Okay, panting. "What is it, Sahib?" asked the watchman. "Has there been an accident? Why are you running?" So the watchman asked, "What is the matter? Why are you running? Did you come across an accident? Did you see that?" "What's the reason?" "I saw something horrible. A boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face." He said that, he narrated what he had seen. He said that he saw a boy and he was crying, he was weeping, and the features, he did not have a face rather. "No face, Sahib. No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing." "Do you mean it was like this, Sahib?" Then what did the watchman do? The watchman heard Mr. Oliver, and then he raised the lantern so that the light would fall on his face, and then asked Mr. Oliver if that boy or the features looked something like this. Asked the watchman, and raised the lamp to his own face. The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. Now, from frying pan to the fire, there's another one. This watchman, when he raised the lantern to his mouth, what did Mr. Oliver find? That even the watchman did not have eyes, ears, nose, even eyebrows, mouth. So, similar features. No feature at all, not even an eyebrow. And that's when the wind blew the lamp out. And at the same time, this had to happen. There was a wind, and the light of the lantern also was blown out. So, pitch dark, absolutely dark. The story ends there. Okay, and quite deliberately, the author, Ruskin Bond, has ended the story there. It is for you to find out or to imagine that what might have happened to Mr. Oliver. Had you been at his place, what would have happened to you? Think about it, and maybe you can come up with your own conclusions. Okay, extend the story a little bit, just a little bit, and maybe give a different conclusion to the story, a different end to the story. Okay, so that will be your first go through it. Okay, and then try to give a different end to the story. That will be a task as well for you, a suspense, and your end should also be equally thrilling and filled with suspense. Okay, so hope you like this story. Read it again and enjoy the time. Stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.